So my name is Peter Griffiths. I'm the co-founder and CEO of The Mind Takeaway, a boutique consultancy specializing in leadership development through experiential learning, coaching, mentoring. I'm also a mentor for the European Innovation Council and an adjunct professor for Watson University in Hyderabad, India. So I want to welcome the first panelist, Dr. Ghada Al-Munajem. She has a PhD in business administration, specializing in finance. She is a programs design consultant at the Saudi Industrial Development Fund and a former deputy chair of the finance department of KSUTA. She is a second prize winner of the Bloomberg Economic Research Challenge for Saudi Arabia in 2021. Welcome. And the second panelist I want to welcome is Ramya Chaturvedi. She is a brand ambassador for VChic image consultancy. She has a master's degree in public relations and advertising from USC Annenberg, and she has a bachelor's degree in international relations and affairs for Wheaton College and the London School of Economics. Welcome. And our third panelist is Veejay Madhavan. He's an accomplished business executive with 25 years experience in managing commercial and people strategies across enterprises. As a founder of OulbyZ, a business consulting and coaching firm, he helps organizations optimize their mission, culture, and people strategies. Veejay focuses on bridging multi-generational workforces, including Gen Z, to drive success and innovation. Welcome. And last but not least, Rajeev Narayan. Welcome. He's the founder and CEO of the Leadership Elements India. He is a passionate book reader who transformed his love for books into a unique business model, creating deep thinking shifts in leaders through global book-based consulting with a mission to convert non-readers into avid readers and empower personal growth. Welcome. Could I have a mic?
You can have a mic? Yeah. Everyone have the microphone? Thank you. I have one more for you. You have to share it temporarily.
Yeah, I thought I would come down from the podium and be at the same level and connect with you. Although we're in a straight line, so I have to keep doing this, yeah? So in my experience coaching and mentoring leaders and entrepreneurs across multiple industries, I found there to be skills gaps, especially in leadership skills. So some of the skills gaps that we see every day working with leaders in large and small organizations, the startup scene, in my experience mentoring for programs for the European Union, the biggest ones are how to listen to understand, how to delegate, give feedback, coach and mentor, and how to be present and focus. So this is really giving your team your time, the gift of your time and attention to be able to build trust and psychological safety. Others, which I'm sure my panelists will agree with, are how to manage your emotions, so emotional intelligence, communication skills, and creativity and innovation. So I believe there will always be skills gaps and talent shortages. However, that doesn't mean that we can't bridge that gap, and obviously we have a room full of talented and experienced educators today. So over to the panel. I'll start with Dr. Ghada. And the first question I want to ask is, what are the skills gaps in your experience?
Okay, thank you, Peter. Good morning to you, to the respected panelists, and to everyone here. From my experience, the gap that was discovered actually, but it was by a comment by a former CEO when he mentioned that our trainees who are in the training for development or for employment programs graduated after 2 years of training without knowing how to generate a report. So this comment caught my attention, so that I recognized that there is a gap that we need to fill in our training programs. So let me give you a brief about our organization. It's a development fund that funds projects in different industries, such as logistics, industry, energy, mining, among others. So when a client comes to the fund, the request is reviewed by different departments at the fund, such as credit, market studies, and technical. So usually we design the training for employment program for 2 years, and we designed it from a theoretical, we give them theoretical training and on-job practical training, internally and externally. So also we accept all majors, so this might also add to the previous gap, meaning that we don't accept only graduates from finance or credit or business. We accept all majors, including pharma, law, all majors. So this comment actually made me think about designing a case study from one of our real current clients of SIDF or the fund. So we have a real client. We have a legacy of 48 plus or 49 now plus years of funding such projects. Why wouldn't we use real clients, real case studies to write a case study to apply it in our internal programs so that our trainees would generate these reports upon when they finish their in-house training and within 4 months. So we came up with this proposal, and I presented to the previous CEO, and actually it was a big no. So, but I don't take no for an answer. So I just went through with the case study, and I designed it, and I worked on it for almost 1 year, although it was a no, but it was a big success, alhamdulillah. So the objectives of this case study was or were to transfer knowledge between different employees within the fund, between different clients. We fund large corporates and small and medium enterprises, so to transfer knowledge among also these clients, and to measure our training impact, since we had a thing with the training impact, and to create a competitive advantage for the academy as we also serve our ecosystem. So our stakeholders for this case study were our clients, our ecosystem, which contains of 13 organizations in the mining and industrial ecosystem, and the wider ecosystem, including universities and other educational and training institutions. So the case study was designed to be delivered throughout the in-house training program, which is 4 months. We designed it to be delivered as a capstone project to be for the trainees to work on for 10 weeks. We linked the case study to the 4 core areas that we deliver in our training program, which are credit, finance, business risk and risk management, and accounting. So we linked all the theoretical concepts that we teach them to what they actually do at the fund as real officers. So they were able to practice and apply everything that they learn on real life, linked to what they do as officers at SIDF. Also, since we accept them from different majors, we paired them into 17 pairs. We mix up the gender and the background so that we have 17 pairs between males and females from different backgrounds, working together on this project for more than 10 weeks. We also designed it as 2 versions, 1 version for the instructor and 1 version for the trainee. And we provided them with expert sessions from our experts at the fund to provide them with their expertise in credit, market studies, and technical studies as well. We also designed a mentorship framework where the alumni, the trainees, the graduates from the program mentored the trainees during while they were working on the case study. Also, we had some in-class activities such as virtual factory visitation, and we asked our experts to act as the client, so that our trainees can ask them when they evaluate the project, and that they can ask them all the questions that they need to ask. Finally, we asked the trainees to present this to a MOC, MCC, which is a Managerial Credit Committee, so that they can challenge them and ask them all the questions just in real life situations. So it's like a simulation, actually. So they were able to generate different reports, such as industry analysis report, financial modeling, ownership report, project evaluation report, loan submission, and finally a final report, just as real life officer after only 4 months of training, unlike the previous situation where after 2 years they couldn't generate any report. We finally evaluated the trainees based on a robust rubrics and, as I mentioned, a mock MCC. And the winner team was the closest to the real appraisal. I think I took long, Peter, enough. Finally, the outcomes, we had some employees who generated reports, who were confident and can generate all the reports just as real officer, which was a big success after a big no, alhamdulillah. Thank you.
First and foremost, well done. And I agree, I think case studies are vital to close those skills gaps, and I think we'll talk about that later in our conversation. So yeah, thank you. And Ramya, over to you. What do you believe in your experience to be the skills gaps as well?
So echoing my panelists' thoughts, there is a global skills shortage. We do see that the Gen Z population, they want to be their own self-boss. They want to have a flexible timetable and a schedule, especially thanks to the pandemic. And the biggest skill gap or the shortage I see is that the youth isn't future ready. We all have academics, we all have good grades, but we don't know how to crack our first interview. We don't know what to do in a social setting. And working with the youth, this is what I noticed. I asked them an easy question, like, okay, tell me something about yourself. And they'll tell me their qualifications and education. Well, as an interviewer, I already have that in your CV and resume. I want to know more about you. So how do you crack your first interview? How do you behave in a social setting? How do you launch yourself as a brand? The youth needs to know these future skills, and they need to be ready for the real world, because I'm sure all of you all can agree to it that your education world is very different from the working and the professional world, and that's the role I play. I connect the youth, I make them future ready from the training I give. Being in image management and a consultant, I prepare them for the future. I bridge the gap between them. I give them the training that they need to sustain in this world and just boost their confidence. They all want to be entrepreneurs. Seeing the Gen Zs today, we want to be our own boss. So my role is just to boost their confidence, give them a platform and the skills and the resources. I'm going to keep this short and crisp because I know all the other panelists have things to talk about this.
That was perfect, thank you. And Veejay, what do you think?
Thanks. I'll agree with you. I've been blessed to be working with Gen Zs since 2017 as a CXO and a CEO. And last year I decided to fire my employers and make the world my playground with Gen Zs. Two things that I've experienced since my corporate career dealing with Gen Zs. A, the emotional intelligence, which was covered in the first panel. And the other one is communication. Gen Zs are very good at articulating their thoughts, but communicating their feelings, moods, emotions, they struggle big time. One of the things I used to do when I was a CEO was I was very big on management trainees. I used to hire direct from the universities. And one of the first things I used to ask them was, let's not have a normal interview. Let's have an interview where you interview me. You pick your leader. What would be the questions you ask me? And there was absolute silence. So that made me really worried. What can we do to sort of integrate young people into the workforce? Because as schools, we have a control environment. In the workforce, it's a crazy environment. It's adaptive, you've got to be agile, you've got to be thinking on your feet. Then you have Gen Zs already being labeled as, cocooned, soft, and that's not unusual. I'm Gen X. I'm sure the baby boomers, when they first saw Gen X, look at these guys, they're more happy with, instead of hard work, they love to do partying and all that. That's what I used to do when I was in my 20s, which wasn't very long ago. And so I think communication, getting in tune with emotions, right? Feedback was something you raised, Peter. And this is a distinction I would offer educators, parents, and even employers. Feedback is always neutral. It's the attitude that we carry to that feedback that makes it positive or negative. And so in the communication, that's the sort of things that we focus on. So when I was an employer, now I work with a lot of Gen Zs where I just do a 1-hour workshop and I help them to uncover what are their dominant personalities and the reasons why they behave and react in a certain way. What's the difference between mood? What's the difference between emotions? When you make a statement, what's an assessment? What's a declaration? What's an assertion? And once they begin to relate to these various concepts, they find that they don't feel that another person's opinion of them becomes their reality. They gain more confidence. So to me, those two skills, communication and EI, are critical.
I really resonate with what you said about education and being in a classroom versus the crazy, uncontrollable, unpredictable work environment. Yeah, and that's where there's definitely a massive gap. It's almost like a catalyst of fire, right? Yeah. Rajeev?
Well, I work with the senior leaders in organizations and not the generation that Veejay works with. There's a very powerful book called Grit, written by Angela Duckworth. She talks about a very powerful equation which says passion is equal to purpose plus interest. I think it's a very, very powerful equation. And with the leaders that I have worked with, what I see as a fundamental gap, and I'm not going to pick this gap or that gap specifically because there are many kind of gaps that you see. But I see this equation falling equally in all places. I see a lot of leaders in the mid-management level and the senior management level not understanding the purpose of why they are doing what they are doing, equally driven by the leaders who are not giving them that particular clarity. Plus, many of them do something because they just want to do it. They don't seem to have the deep interest in what they want to do. And when they don't have the deep interest, they can't get into a deep work of doing their work. Like Carl Newport says, when you can't do a deep work, you can't really come out and deliver for the organization. So I'm not going to list down gap 1, gap 2 skill, but I think I see this fundamentally lacking where alignment to what organizations want to deliver and that particular alignment not getting communicated to different levels of leaders and organization seems to be a fundamental gap, and because of which different gaps arise in different dimensions. So I think it's important for people like all of us in this room who are doing a great job to go back and see how do you build your leaders, your people who are able to get this equation right, which is passion is equal to purpose plus interest. When these two come together, I think the skill gap would definitely get addressed. Then you get a passionate skill. Because for me, I don't see this as a skill gap, I see this as a passionate skill gap, which means organizations and institutions and communities have a lot of skills, but they don't see people with a passion that's being shown in a skill. So I think that's the area that I would love all of us to probably work upon, if that answers your question, Peter.
Yeah, that's interesting, because would you connect passion with, for example, curiosity? I see people sometimes lacking the curiosity, and I can link that back to passion, right?
Yeah. That's because the lack of interest, hence there's no curiosity to do more.
Thank you. So I'll go back to Ghada. Why is there a global talent shortage? What's your best guess with that?
So I do believe we need in the training programs to identify certain maybe competencies, and maybe we can focus more on the entrepreneurship, the interpersonal skills where emotional intelligence, communication, negotiation, especially with the development of the smartphones and the AI and TOT, all of the technological advances. So when people don't know how to connect, to communicate, this will create a gap, in my opinion. So I think this is one of the main sources of the skills gap, yeah.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And Ramya?
Yeah, I agree to that. I think this other point that can lead to a skill gap is that due to the pandemic, this got reinforced as well, is we all like flexible schedules. We all, especially being a Gen Z myself, I like doing Zoom meetings. I like managing my timetable by myself. And just having a flexible work schedule, being my own boss in today's time, I want to create something of my own. And I speak on behalf of most of the Gen Zs because I work with them. We want to create something of ourselves. We want to have our own brand. And having these skills shortages, like people don't know how to connect with others, interpersonal skills, communication, behavior, even how to launch yourself out there as a brand is much needed in today's time. And thanks to this pandemic, it got reinforced.
It's interesting that I'm just reflecting on when I joined the workforce. Branding was something I would never have thought about. Now, it's a whole new world.
Exactly, and also, besides branding, I think finding your true passion, like both my panelists said, I strongly believe that as long as you have a good business module, you can make money out of anything. Though it be your passion, it be your curiosity, a strong business module, you can make millions of dollars. Like, who thought a YouTuber would be able to do that? Like 5 years ago, and now you see vlogging and YouTubing and content creation is an actual thing. It's an actual work thing. Yeah.
I mean, gaps aside, there's such a freedom in just knowing that, right? If you're willing to develop those skills gaps, right?
Exactly, and now the Gen Zs believe it. We know that, these are the things we can do and we can work for ourselves, not for anyone else.
Veejay, what do you think about that?
Well, I think, yeah, you're right. The two things, we look at talent shortage, which is driven by a shift in demographics between, I think, there are a lot of Gens, well, the baby boomers have gone out. There's a narrower Gen X and then the Gen Z entry level because the millennials have gone past the entry levels. And, as Ramya said, there's a lot of choices to Gen Zs. In fact, the term quiet quitting is not new. It's been happening. It's just that, now we've coined the phrase quiet quitting. But it's been happening way before the pandemic. And these global talent shortages will continue, I think, until 2030. So we're in a very critical period. Now, I believe that when employers look at attracting Gen Zs, you have to be serious about well-being. You've got to be serious about flexibility. I'll give you an example. When I got into Laos, right? Laos is a very small landlocked kingdom. That was my last posting as a CEO. The average age, including myself, was 23. So you can imagine how young my boys and girls were. And I realized that having all these formal structures and all this stuff, was not going to work. So we got away with all the CXO offices, including mine. We brought in work from anywhere, not just work from home, right? And we coined them as privileges, not entitlements. So if you abuse it, then as an employer, we have a right to tweak it. So they are fully aware of the risk. They're conscious that if they abuse the system, they will lose it. And there's also the thing about vulnerability among leadership. Leaders tend to have this shield as they go up there and say, we can't say the wrong thing. I tell you, I've stood up on town halls and apologized to my staff many times where the leadership has made a mistake. I think that's what they're looking at. Employees look at that. That's the other thing. Then employee experience in the brand. This is part of my doctoral research, which I'm doing at the moment with Gen Zs and whether we should have multi-generational employee propositions. And Gen Zs look at your employer brand as a mirror or a lens into the actual culture of your organization. So there's no point in trying to come up with something fancy where inside culture is toxic, right? Managers are micromanaging, right? Shareholders micromanaging. The CEO looks like a Superman when he's just human. These things don't fly well. And so you don't just have quiet quitting, you have early quitting, right? And that's because a lot of Gen Zs have a very nice safety net, right? Particularly in Asia. What do? So, well, my parents are there, they're making enough money. I don't mind going back home and, sitting down and taking a break. And they love this breaks, they think after a year they need a 3-month break. But that's them. We need to understand that. So I think these are some of the reasons. Yeah.
I agree.
I love what you said about, the old school way of leadership is shield up, deflect the shield over us, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, you were pointing to vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
And that's another skill that's widely in need of being developed, right? Yeah. That's right. And what do you think about that?
All right, so we are talking about skill gap. Let's remove the word skill and probably bring two another words, ability and capability, right? And I'm telling this from an example from India, and I come from south of India, and there's a north of India. What we see there is a lot of people from the north, boys and girls, they migrate to the south of India to take jobs. The reason is people in the south of India have a comfort for which they don't want to go and pick up jobs. The political system has also given them a lot of freebies because of which they don't want to really stretch themselves. Whereas the boys and girls from the north of India, they come down to south for search of jobs. They get good money, they save, they send money back to their families in north. If we just pick up that as an example and bring it to the corporate side. So what is ability? Ability is the natural talent that an individual has, right? And I say this here because I've seen this across the leadership space, and I'm going to keep it only to leadership because that's the area in which I operate. I see a lot of people not converting that ability into its fullest potential. And when that happens, that's when ability becomes capability, right? Now, I think a lot of leaders and a lot of individuals need to really figure out how do I create a system where this gap can be plugged by helping individuals and organizations and again communities to stretch that ability to its fullest potential. And when that happens, then you make a community of capable people, then there's no question of skill gap at all. I think it's important for the system and the individuals both together figure out how do we create a sustainable method of helping people to reach their fullest potential. I don't see that happening in multiple organizations because individuals come for doing certain jobs, leaders get those jobs done transactionally, and then quarter ends and year ends and targets are met and that's all. Not much is done in terms of stretching that individual to his or her fullest potential. I think if that happens, and we start looking at this word capability building rather than skill building, I think we would be living in a world where skill gap would not be there at all. That's my take.
I like how you put it, very eloquent, because, we talked about hard and soft. Even that's a bit shonky as labels, right? Yeah.
And just adding on, I really liked the point you said in stretching the person to its fullest potential, because I do think that the Gen Zs, we do need to be pushed a little outside our comfort zone to really know our truest potential. And it's important of the leader to make us do that, because otherwise we like the safety net we had. Yeah. We do need to venture out and be pushed. And that's the importance that the leader gives. You need to do it. So yeah, excellent point.
If I can just add to that, I have a 15-year-old boy. And if you go to our generation, I remember my father bought me a bicycle which was 300 rupees, and he made me wait for 2 years to pick that cycle, because when I went and asked him for the cycle, he said, "Which rank are you in the class?" And I said, "I'm 8th. He said, "Come in the top 3, I'll buy you the cycle." I studied hard for the next year. I came 5th. So I go to my mother and tell dad to get me the cycle. He says, "Which rank?" I said, 5th. He said, "Come in the 3rd, I'll give you the cycle." He made me wait for 2 years, which is 365 plus 365 days for a cycle that is just 376 rupees, and I still have the bill at my home. And my son comes and says to me, "Dad, I need the Spider-Man game and this video console." He says, "That's just 20,000 rupees. So I tell him, don't say just. There's nothing called just 20,000, just 500, just 100. The word just itself tells us that their mind is working from a very comfort zone. They don't value what it is. And if you bring that to organizations and workplaces, I think the young leaders who are wanting to make it big in life do not realize the importance of their need to stretch beyond their comfort. And I think leaders play a very significant role, like parents at home, to do that.
And
Wow, what a lesson. It's a masterclass in patience as well, and experiential learning, right? Yeah, go for it.
So I'd like to jump in. I'm a father of a Gen Z, so I can tell you this, I relate. I believe parents have a very active role in also educating our, don't just fully outsource it to the schools and leave it to the educators. Because Gen Zs are worried about their emotional skills, their financial well-being. So I take this thing from Rajeev here, and my daughter is 11, but she knows the difference between needs and wants. Right? I give her allowance. I said, what do you need, I get for you. What do you want comes out of your pocket money. And the first month, she ran out of her pocket money within a week. I say, you're broke officially, and you're not getting a single penny from me. But you may do some housework and earn some money. So at 11, she learns, okay, this is, if I'm careless with what I earn, I will end up with nothing. And so I see her now going into a shop. She spends 30 minutes walking around. She comes out. I said, aren't you getting anything? Nah, I wanted to get this, but now I've changed my mind. I don't think I need it now. So these are skills, I believe parents have an active role to play. And, and that's should not be just left to the educators. Educators supplement that, right? But parents have a huge role, right? And it's not about the grades, it's about the skills.
You know what, I couldn't agree more, because the people who come into the workplace when I was a leader myself and recruiting around the clock, it was clear to see when someone had great parenting, when they'd learned basic skills, exactly what you're pointing to, they were definitely more rounded. The gaps were much less, if that makes sense.
And then just jumping on, I feel like, wow, my parents are similar. My mom's sitting in the audience out there, and the parenting was the same thing. I think what they try to teach me, and what y'all are trying to teach your kids, is you can't be complacent. Yeah. You need to work hard, and you need to work smart. It's like, as Gen Zs, I know you said before, it's not privilege, it's not entitlement, but it's we are aware of the things we have. So the way you treat Gen Zs is different. So my parents, Asians, is similar. It's we'll pay for your education, but what would you do? So it's up to me taking up 2 part-time jobs, being an anchor, being a publicist, an anchor, and then doing an externship. It was all done by myself, and that was just good parenting. So the parents know when the kids are doing it, and they are rewarded in the same way, and you can notice what good upbringing is and how it reflects on your workforce. So I always tell my mom, because she runs the company, is that you run a company like a mom. The message you want to try to send is that I got you, so go explore, and I have your back. So that's the message you want to say, that go explore, make mistakes, learn by yourself, because I got you. So that's the best way anyone can run a company.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to go back to Ghada. So let's go into solutions mode a little bit. And again, I'm sure there's no silver bullet answer for this, but what are the solutions out there? And actually, I want to start with you, Ghada, because you talked about it very, straight out of gate. You mentioned case studies, right? And we talked about this offline, in our preparation for this panel, that it's such a wonderful opportunity for real-world skills to filter in to someone joining the workforce who, they might come from an Ivy League top 10 place, but as we've all agreed, it doesn't really prepare you for that reality of your first week at work, like rabbit in the headlights. Yeah, so what are your thoughts on what are the solutions? You can talk about case studies again, but is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I do believe that on-job training as well, this is a very, very good solution to bridge the gap. So on-job training, practical training, maybe in early years, even in the late high school years, summer training in different institutions, engaging in the real world. this will help to bridge the gap. Also, when you have this alignment between different organizations, training institutions, companies, training or educational institutions, when they are all aligned about the gaps that we have, and we start bridging them early in the very early stages of learning and education, this also will help bridging the gap as well.
Building on, of course, communication, understanding how to work with your target audience, what you're trying to communicate, and boosting confidence is an important skill gap that we need to figure out. Another thing is moving ahead with technology. We had a little discussion before about AI, and AI is here to stay. No matter how bad people like it, how much they like it, we have to figure it out and how we're going to use this to our best of the ability. So moving on with time and accepting things.
Yeah, you talked about, in our preparation, and I couldn't agree more. It is an unknown animal, and even I have some fear around it and thinking, but to embrace it is probably the best way to go. And I was asking you, for someone who's just recently been through studies, how do you combat plagiarism? And you were explaining there are solutions there. So it's already universities having to step up and just keep abreast and keep a pace, right?
Yeah, and I give the example when people ask me about AI, is it good or bad? And I'm just like, when the calculator came out, we all thought our kids are going to forget how to do maths. Yeah. But guess what? We didn't. So now AI is here, and we're just going to make the best of it, embrace it, and be more efficient.
Thank you.
Well, I take your point from AI. Wait till you see the power of AI and quantum computing together. And that will transform jobs, and that will also have an impact on the education sector. Because the green jobs, right, the AI-related jobs will become more popular. You will find other jobs, which is subject of another panel, so I'll reserve the comments there. But I'll go back to the first panel where they talked about who. This is what we really need to focus on, right? Who are these students? Who are they? So instead of ways of doing, we should be focusing on ways of being. And, the feedback mechanisms, the experience that students go through, immersions. I think there's a huge opportunity for for private sector and the education sector to collaborate to get a lot of these summer internships or even immersion programs. A case in point I remember was we were looking at trying to build blockchain for microcredit institutions in Laos, which is really behind in a lot of this. And, I hope no one's here working for the Big Four, but instead of paying tens of thousands of dollars for a Big Four, I managed to bring in a 17-year-old polytechnic student in finance through the ASEAN Foundation. 3 months, he built a prototype. And when I asked him what it was, he said, I actually learned a few things. I come from Singapore. I've come here. I realized Laos is different. I've become a little bit of, I begin to understand other cultures. I know how to learn how to communicate. It was tough, but I learned the hard way. I think that's a huge opportunity between for students to get into these kind of summer jobs. And I think I would urge both the private sector and the education sector to collaborate, because the best, welfare we can give our students is first-class training. The ability to fail, have that safety net, and become better.
I couldn't agree more. Collaboration is essential. Rajeev?
All right, so let's look at it this way. There's a very powerful book I'm going to talk about, and I run a book-based leadership consulting house, so you'll see me going back to books. There's a very interesting book some of you should pick up and read. It's called The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Galway. It's a classic book. Again, he comes with a very interesting equation. He says performance is equal to potential minus interference. Look at the words. Performance is equal to potential minus interference. So what are we people sitting in this room here, and why have we come here for? And what are we doing primarily? Let's forget about, is there a direct solution to address the skill gap? I don't think so, there is a direct solution. But can we look at methods? Absolutely, yes. If all of us can figure out how do we remove those interferences, in the equation, then we should be able to create a high level of performance in people, which means their skills are going up, which means, as I said earlier, their capabilities are going up. And what are interferences? It could be cultural interferences. It could also be, like Jeff Keller in his book called Attitude is Everything talks about nourishing environment. How do leaders create a non-toxic environment where everything is very nourishing? Then your interference goes on. Some of us as leaders, we ourselves become the interference for the individual. So if you put yourself there in the place of I, interference, then the potential of the individual doesn't come out. So let's remove ourselves out. So when we do these things, there's a high possibility for individuals to rise above and display the highest level of performance. I think the challenge here in organizations and communities again is many of us are not working on removing the interferences, which I think are the inputs. And we are still focusing on improving performance by increasing skill gap. I don't think we can ever get anything by working on an output. We should look at what the input is. And the input is nothing but removing those interferences, which could be coming up in any form and format in the workspace of that individual. And I very, very strongly believe that the responsibility to improve the skill and reduce the gap is 50% on the individual and 50% on the organization who play a very significant role. I don't think we can conveniently say that organization need to do everything because the individual plays a very significant role from a responsibility paradigm. When both of them do take the effort together to identify what those interferences are and make a collective effort to remove those interferences, I think that's when the skill gap challenge could probably be minimized to an extent. I don't think if it can be ever made zero. That's a dream statement for me, but at least we can minimize it to a large extent. That's my take.
Yeah, I like that. And interference, yeah, I mean, I'm just reflecting on it now. It's the old school way of leadership, micromanagement, too much measurement, all of this.
They're all interferences.
Yeah, but it's easier said than done. I mean, most of the leaders that come to us or organizations, they believe a good support system is to be in someone's face, standing over their shoulder. But, I couldn't agree more to what you said, that really it's about being in the background, listening to understand, but being transparent and being a bit vulnerable and saying, look, I support you, I trust you, I value you, I see you, but I'm not going to stand over you. And they're the best leaders who can develop that skill. They're almost in the background, but if something happens, they're straight out the gate there to support you. Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. We've got 3 minutes left. Does anyone, in closing, have anything to say just on the topic, really? I can keep talking, no problem.
I'd like to add something here. I think for all of us, from an angle of improving capabilities in people, improving individuals, helping them to reach their full potential, I think the effort is always a waterfall effect. Everything happens from top to bottom. So when we go back and try doing certain things, whether in the education space that many eminent panelists spoke earlier, or in the corporate space, I think all of us should start hitting at the top level. Because when we make very deep thinking shifts at the top level, there is bound to see some effect at the bottom level. Independent of whether you work at the Gen Z or you work at Gen X, whatever you want to call it, I'm not very affiliated with these words. But I think I fundamentally believe that you need to know where you need to hit so that you have the right noise. And we should not get confused between the signal and the noise. And I think every time all of us should figure out that we do everything at the top level in an organization, a community, or an institute, then you can see a lot of change happening at different levels in terms of skill gap addressal, in terms of performance improvement, or whatever you want to call it. So I think it's a very top-down and a waterfall effort from all of us. That's my summary statement.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because it's so overused, top-down, all of this, right? But when I see a leadership team start to develop themselves slowly but surely, and that trickles down, that's when there's impact and culture change. Without it, quite often, there might be the money on the table to run a skills program, leadership development over 6 months or a year, but quite often there's key stakeholders, key decision makers, senior leadership who just don't buy into it. And it almost becomes almost like a box ticking exercise, so to speak.
Well, yeah, I'll take this one, which is nice. look at, we spoke a lot about communication, EI, a lot of strategies, including case studies from, from the policymakers' view. I believe the biggest challenge for education sector is this, and I'll offer this as a distinction. I think we've heard fixed and growth mindset, but I think we are going into the era of a reinvention mindset. What are we doing as education, educators? What are we doing as employers? What are we doing as parents? I think there's this huge thing about embracing a reinvention mindset. And schools are going to be, education institutions are going to be under significant pressure. How do we just evolve and prepare for the next generation of workforce, right? And I think that's going to be a question to ponder about. So I offer this distinction back to the educators. What about the reinvention mindset? What are being done for teachers, for educators? How are they being evolved in this world? Yeah? Leave that to your imagination.
Good way to end. Valid point. Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed this and it's been insightful. Over to questions, I guess.
Oh, we have questions.
There's a question.
Give him a round of applause. We got the microphone right up here. Give him a round of applause. Really interesting. Some of these numbers and statistics about Gen Z and how fast they're moving jobs is astronomical, right? I just saw something. It's over 140% they're moving around. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nazlı. I'm originally Turkish, but I'm coming from New York. I love, how you guys talk about the personal branding, passion, purpose, interest, curiosity. And Ramya, I have a son who is 10 years old, and he comes and he says, I'm the boss of myself. I didn't know what to say. And one day he came and he said, Mom, I want to live my true self. What they told me that I need to be a mathematician. Okay, I do math, but I want to live my true self. So my question is actually for all generation, but let's focus for Gen Z and Alpha. Do you think if Gen Z and Gen Alpha live their true self, would they be able to build right skills, design their career with purpose, and be able to live their passion?
So I do connect a lot with your question, because my mom and I, we keep on butting heads on the same thing. My mom keeps on telling me to do certain things, and I keep on saying, I want to live, this is me, this is a version of me. What you want to try to tell your kid is that I want you to be the best version of yourself. Now, to be the best version of yourself, these are the skills you may need. How are you going to be like a footballer? You have to train, you have to work hard, you have to put in the effort to achieve this. And also, we're changing, the times are changing. So the skills you may have needed in your generation is not needed today. I'm thinking of an example. It can be something like, this is interesting. So yeah, I just think it's like changing skills and changing time with AI specifically. How are we being efficient? In today's time, we may not have to use like telephone books, to find someone's numbers. We have an iPhone, we can Google. So it's also moving along with time, being smart, and also reminding your kid that if you want to be the best version of yourself, don't try to be like anyone else. You have to be the best version of yourself. So this is what we're gonna do. You want to be a footballer, you want to be an artist, you're going to put in the work, we're going to get you to art classes or whatever classes you want. But there is a fine line in a kid trying to be, trying to get away with things and actually wanting to be themselves. And I think a parent knows best what they need out of their kids. And I have like two parents out here, so they can chip in on this and how to go about parenting.
Yeah, as a Gen Z, I'm a parent of a Gen Z. I would say from a more psychological and emotional standpoint is be the mirror, right? And every time they do something, and be the mirror, be objective, don't prejudge, allow them to fail, don't just give them encouragement, but help them reflect on their learning. So that's the first one. And the second one is for Gen Zs. From a parenting point of view, be their friend. So, I'm sometimes the dad, I'm sometimes the dude, I'm sometimes the bro, And when my daughter's pissed off, I'm sometimes Mr. So let's get used to that kind of terminology. You know, 3-letter, 4-letter, 5-letter acronyms. I learned one just a few weeks ago. IYK. If you know, you know, right? So it is confusing for us, for those of us who've learned, you know, vocabulary and grammar and its structure. But I've got used to all these multiple letter acronyms. So be their friend, you know, be as close and know when to be the parent.
Question?
Hi, good morning. My name is Arya, and I work with Nikon Middle East. We run a photography and a filmmaking program in Middle East with schools and universities. I do agree with the panelists when they mentioned that when we integrate a skill development gap, it starts like a waterfall. It starts from the management. We have after-school programs in Middle East. How important do you feel that we need to integrate that in our education system? Not like an added program, but then they should be going through it on their daily lecture plans, because that's what we're trying to bridge that gap with our Nikon School program. It's free of cost, by the way, we do it in the region. But then something that I always have a challenge, that the school management don't understand the importance of having it in their curriculum rather than as an added program. So what are your inputs on that?
I couldn't agree more, and actually it's not like an addition, it should just be a living purpose. And again, it goes back to curiosity, right? That if everyone sees leadership as an individual endeavor, not just for the leadership team. And actually, I've just started working with a university, and Mira and I, who's in the audience now, we collaborate on case studies, this kind of thing. And when we see everyone embodying self-leadership, that's when it becomes more fluid, it's more natural. That's when I see students actually keeping the faculty on the toes. And that's what we need to see for the future generations, that they should be going there first just as much as the leaders, just as much as, for example, the dean of the university. And I'm kind of seeing that already in education. So that's the shift that really excites me. I don't know what the rest of the panel thinks about that.
Just adding on, instead of telling them that, so being an image consultant, it's like, instead of telling people that, oh, it's important that you take these services because, you know, you'll become confident, you'll know basic manners and etiquettes, start with an insight. You have to tell them that, you know, in a social setting, you aren't going to feel awkward if you don't know, you don't know how to eat this way, if you don't know how to present this way. You aren't going to feel awkward when an interviewer asks you, tell me about yourselves, tell me why was there a gap, why was this? So lead with the insight rather than telling them the importance of it. Once they're in the situation themselves, they'll understand the importance of it automatically. Use the halo effect, I would say.
Round of applause, our panelists, second panel for the day. Great, thank you so much for your time. Please, I invite you to stand up so we can get a nice photograph of you guys together. Anyone in the audience that wants to jump into the conversation, now's your time.